Hello and welcome back to Gary's Garage. In this episode I'm going to be taking a look at the rear brakes. So last time we managed to finish up the modifications to the rear diff carrier and put the original diff back in place. Before I put the drive shafts in, I'm going to pull the brakes apart and give them a quick check over and make sure they're all free, because I know that that side is not free. So let's get started. So much like the rest of the rear end, the hubs and brakes are from a 200SX. So that means it's disc with caliper for normal day-to-day brakes, and then an internal drum handbrake. Now the handbrake on this has never been particularly good, so it'd be quite nice if during this I can just adjust the handbrake and make sure that it's locking up nice and tightly and the handbrake actually works properly. So on this side it's spinning pretty easily at the moment, forwards and backwards. Obviously there's a little bit of resistance there and rubbing because of the rust on the disc from where it's been sat for so long. It's been sat outside for about 6 months in all kinds of British weathers, so mostly rain, before I moved it into the garage to start working on it. So I think a lot of that is just the surface rust, but what I'll do is pull this apart and we'll check the handbrake mechanism as well. So let's start pulling it to bits. Okay, so I've just pulled the handbrake on, and this is one of the reasons why I want to sort it out, because with the handbrake on I can still turn the wheel, and that should be locked up pretty solid. So as I said, let's pull it to bits. So although the brakes have been pretty good, or so I thought, this sliding pin on this caliper is pretty stuck in. Okay, so with the caliper and carrier off, it's now time to take the brake disc off, which I'll need to loosen the handbrake to do. Okay, so inside there looks pretty good. Not too rusty, not too glazed over. Okay, so the bearing units are fairly new. They went on 4 years ago, just before or just after the car went on the road. So they should be pretty good. All the brake mechanism, from what I can see, looks to be in the right place. So it could be that for this side all it needs is this adjuster at the bottom, meaning just to push the shoes out a bit so that when the handbrake is used it's got less distance to take up between the pads and the inside of the disc, or inside of the drum. So yes, this side looks okay. So I think what I'll do is I'll put this back together and move on to the other side, which looks not as good. Before I put this together, the sensible thing to do would be to figure out what is going on with this bottom sliding pin mount. So let's take this over to the bench and see what's up with it. Alright, so here we have the carrier for the caliper, and this is the top mount and this is the bottom. So the top one is a slightly thicker pin than the bottom, top one there. and that's nice and smooth in there. There's almost no resistance there, but the bottom one, whilst that does now go in and out after working it a couple of times, it's still very stiff. So what I think has probably happened is inside here has corroded slightly, so then the rust has bubbled up, which is pushing this rubber insert that goes all the way through in and is clamping down on the pin, making it tight and not leaving it loose. So I think what I will try to do, although it might be a little bit risky, is try to pull this whole rubber insert out and then get a file down there and give it a bit of a clean on the inside, and maybe a little wire brush attachment if I've got one for a Dremel or something similar, and see if I can clean up inside there and reinsert the rubber without damaging the rubber. Otherwise I'll then need to order a new one. So let's see if we can remove it, and let's get some lubrication for that. Right, yes, that's come out without breaking it, and yes, you can see on there that there's deposits of rust. So the rust inside there will have expanded, closing down the opening inside this, and that means that the sliding pin is getting stuck. So let's get something in there to give it a good clean out. Try to show how much rust there is inside there. Okay, this is pretty telling. Let's move the camera around this side. Look at all of the rust that is falling out of that. So you'll probably see more come out as I file a bit more. I was not expecting that much rust to come out of that, but looking inside there now, that looks a lot clearer. So yes, that is much better. And that's just the file without any kind of wire brush. So the next thing to do will be to try to clean up this little rubber insert and then get it back in the hole, all lubricated up, and see how we go from there. Okay, so that is sliding in and out of there much nicer now. Much better than it was. So let's put it back together. Okay, that's that side all back together, other than adjusting it through this little hole here. So let's move over the other side and see what the problem is over there. Okay, so over on this side we have a slightly different story. It's now getting a bit tight. That's gone very tight. Very tight, and then gone loose again. So something's binding up in there and taking it in reverse. I don't know if you heard that then. Yeah, something's definitely not happy inside there. So let's, big click there. Something's definitely not right here. So caliper, carrier off, drum off, and let's have a look. So again, this bottom pin is quite tight, so it might be that we need to do the same thing and clean out the inside of the carrier. Top again is nice and loose. Yeah, again, that bottom one very tight. Okay, I can see immediately what's gone wrong. Let me show you. Okay, so inside here is a spring and pin that should hold the brake shoe in the right place, and as you can see, hopefully, that's pretty bent up. If we compare that to the other side, and you can see there, hopefully that's just a little bit straighter than the other side. So that's face on there and face on there. So with that not being in line, that means all of the rest of the brake shoes are out of alignment, and that's going to be catching. And that is not going to be, that's why nothing is healthy. And it looks like that there is no longer securely attached either. So a combination of all of these things is probably why it's not working right. So let's pull it to pieces and check each bit one at a time. Hopefully you can see just how bent that pin is. Now that should be straight, and it is most definitely not straight anymore. Okay, that most definitely should be attached. And that end of that should be square and should not be chewed up like that. So yes, the side of this brake is absolutely and totally incorrect and pretty broken. Okay, so up here near the top is where this bit should be. That's supposed to go through that hole there. That hole there is pretty misshapen and definitely should not be. That should be nice and square. That hole there is for a fixing bolt, which is not there. So I think something has happened there that's somehow come loose, whether that's happened first and has caused the rest of it, or whether something else has got caught first and the stresses have pulled this to bits, I'm not sure. However, there's quite a few damaged pieces here. So that's damaged. The pins on either side are both damaged. This backing plate is damaged there as well. And that's all I can see for the moment. But that in itself is enough that I'm going to need to get hold of some more pieces and probably pull this whole hub assembly off, so disconnect it from all of the suspension arms, get it up on the bench, although I might be able to get I should be able to get to these 4 bolts from the back to remove this, but I'm thinking it might be easier to do it on the bench. So that certainly is not going back together today, and I need to get onto the internet and onto some forums. Okay, so that's quite a bit more broken than I was expecting it to be. I was hoping that it would be something just marginally out of line, that would be fairly simple to just tweak and put back together. But it's not, so I'm going to need to scour the internet to find some new parts. So, as this is not going back together, let's pull it apart a bit more and get all of the damaged pieces off, so that I know exactly what it is that I need to get replacements for. So let's start off by taking the bearing unit out, and then that should free up this backing plate. Right, there's the 4 bolts that hold the bearing unit to the hub, so nice and easily accessible from the rear. Okay, so there's the back plate, and that there is a bit mangled up, so I'm not sure whether I'll be able to. I'll have a look and see whether I can straighten it up first, but otherwise I might see whether I can get a replacement. And we can also have a look at tidying up this carrier as well. Okay, so that has totally broken and fallen apart, and I noticed as I was just tugging on it anyway, there is a split in it anyway, so that's going to need to be replaced anyway. So let's clean out the rust. So I was hoping that this handbrake would be a little bit easier to fix and not require any new parts. Between the last clip and this one, I've been onto the internet and have ordered some replacement parts to fix what's broken, and just waiting for those to arrive now. So while I'm waiting for those to arrive in the post over the next few days or weeks, I'm going to move on and do something that's purely cosmetic on the car, and that is to replace the rear bumper. This bumper is not in the best of condition. The chrome work's a little bit pitted. There's a few dings around the mounting bolts. A nice dent there where somebody's obviously backed it into something, and this mounting isn't much better, and it's, yeah, not particularly straight. So I've acquired another bumper. It's still second hand, it's not perfect, but it is a lot better than this one. Right, that was slightly less of an ordeal than I thought it would be, other than that first one, which fought me a little bit as the square head of the domed coach bolts dropped away from the bumper, and then the whole thing was just spinning. The liberal dosings of WD-40 a couple of times a day for the last few days did its job and loosened them off quite nicely. And when it goes back together, I will not be reusing the horrible old ones, but I have a set of nice shiny new ones from the Ford Anglia 105e Owners Club. But before it goes back on, these brackets are pretty crusty, rusty, and generally horrible. that's those a little bit less rusty and crusty than they were. So I'm going to give these a quick prime and paint. So I'm going to make use again of my trusty hanging things from the ceiling. I've got a bit of metal, an old shelf end screwed to the ceiling with a few bits of wax coated string hanging down, and these make pretty good holders for things that you want to just give a quick paint and dry. And the wax coated string means that it doesn't stick to anything. Right, now comes the fun bit, to reassemble everything. So I have here, or what should be here, is a new bumper. Right, there we go. So that's nice and shiny, slightly less pitted than the one that came off, and most importantly, it's straight. So let's get some brackets and my new bolts and get it reassembled. Okay, that is so much nicer. That's sitting really nice and straight. But that is looking pretty good to me. That really smartens up the back end a bit. So with that bumper on and looking very nice, I can move my attention very briefly to the front end of the car and finish off one of the jobs that was outstanding from last time as I was waiting for parts. So I've got some new vacuum hose arrived, so we can run it from the inlet plenum here through and up to the fuel pressure regulator. Okay, that was nice and simple. Another small job ticked off the list. So that's been a fairly frustrating time. What I thought would be a relatively quick job of checking these brakes out has turned into a bit of an ongoing epic, which requires me to spend even more money on more parts. So first off is of course this caliper slider, the perished rubber in there. So that's on its way. And then there's the whole backplate handbrake mechanism, anchor block setup. Myself and my dad, when we built this car originally, did modify this slightly from how it sits on the 200SX. So I'll show you in a subsequent episode when both bits arrived the changes that we made. And I think that's probably the reason why this has failed. So got a little bit more work to do to modify this and its mounting on the hub. So join me next time on Garry's Garage when hopefully these bits will have arrived and I can finish this off. Thanks for watching.